Welcome back to Whispers of the Night, where fairy tales don't end with happily ever after, they just get quieter. Tonight, we wander deep into the forest, far beyond the path your parents warned you not to stray from, past the wolves, past the thorns, past even your childhood memories of bedtime stories, because this isn't about Hansel and Gretel. This is about the woman in the woods, the one with sugar in her walls and salt in her bones, the one they call a witch. But what they never told you was she didn't build that house to lure children. She built it to be left alone. So settle in. Don't nibble on anything you didn't bake yourself. And while you're here, hit like and follow, because the next time you wander off the path, you might want someone like her on your side. Call me Alara. Just Alara is enough. Those titles like Green Forest Witch, Child-Eating Old Woman, or recently the nickname those kids in the village gave me that sounds like the name of some cheap canned soup. Honestly, I don't really care. People tend to paint what they don't understand or deliberately don't want to understand in the darkest colors, just like how your boss sometimes looks at the thick report you stayed up all night to finish and says bluntly, "It feels like something's missing," without bothering to point out what that something is. Well, that's life. I've lived here in the deepest heart of the Whispering Woods for so long that I can't even remember how many times I've seen the moon wax and wane, how many seasons the leaves have turned yellow and fallen, only to bud and bloom again. Maybe it's been nearly a century or more. Who knows? Time in the old forest has its own way of working, unlike how your clocks just tick-tock, urging you from one meeting to the next deadline. Here, silence is a privilege, a luxury I cherish more than any sparkling gem. Before you rush to picture an old crone with a hooked nose, sallow skin, and a wild laugh, allow me to clarify a few things. It's true that I'm no longer young, and my wrinkles are numerous enough to draw a map of a few small nations. But I don't get pleasure from seeing others suffer. My hobbies are much simpler: reading books by the fireplace, collecting oddly shaped roots, and above all, baking. Oh, and a little architecture too. A little sweet architecture. This so-called gingerbread house is actually my life's masterpiece. Think about it. After decades of only being accompanied by the wind howling through the leaves and the incessant chirping of insects every night, who wouldn't crave a little color, a little flavor to make life more interesting? I don't have the ability to go on healing trips like you young people do now, and I certainly don't have the budget to hire a famous architect to redecorate my living space, so I did it myself. It all started one cold winter a long, long time ago. The snow fell heavily, the firewood was running low, and my stomach was rumbling with hunger. I was never good at hunting, and I could only grow a few basic vegetables, but I do have a special talent with flour and sugar. So I thought, why not try making a really big batch of gingerbread, both to eat and to make the atmosphere in the house warmer? And then, like an artist caught up in a creative frenzy, I didn't stop at just one batch of gingerbread. I started experimenting with more complex recipes, rare spices that I found in the forest. Ginger from ancient tree roots, honey from wild beehives deep in the rock crevices, cinnamon powder ground from thousand-year-old bark. It might sound as fancy as those healthy foods you often buy at ridiculously expensive organic food stores, but for me, they were simply available and free ingredients. From small, pretty cookies, I began to think about building something bigger. Why not cookie walls? A roof made of soft candy tiles? Windows made of rock candy as clear as crystal? The idea was initially just a flash in my mind, a somewhat crazy innovation, but then loneliness and a passion for art drove me. I wanted to create something beautiful, a testament to my existence in this desolate old forest. And so, my project of the century began. I spent countless days and nights kneading dough, shaping, baking. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. Morning light streamed through the sugar glass windows, not just falling onto the quiet furniture and the lonely silhouette of me anymore. There was a shift in the air, a different scent mingling with the familiar aroma of gingerbread. Perhaps the smell of children? Oh, right, my two little guests, Hansel and Gretel. For a brief moment, I had almost forgotten they were real. I'd half convinced myself that last night's events were just some strange dream brought on by too much frosting tasting. I stretched, my joints cracking like brittle cookies snapping in half. I hadn't slept well. I'd tossed and turned all night, wondering what to do with the children. Keep them here? But what did I know about caring for kids? My only knowledge of these tiny creatures came from old cautionary tales, most of which didn't end too well for curious children or solitary forest-dwelling women. It was the kind of dilemma that made you feel like you had to choose between finishing your boss's urgent deadline or attending a mandatory team-building retreat you had zero interest in. I tiptoed out of my sponge cake bedroom, trying not to make a sound. The two kids were still fast asleep in the cozy little nook I'd cleared for them. Hansel had his leg draped over Gretel, mouth slightly open, probably dreaming of swimming in a chocolate river. Gretel was clutching a gummy doll she'd found on one of my bookshelves last night. They looked so harmless, even kind of cute in their own peculiar way. All right, Alara, I told myself, they're here now. At the very least, they deserve a decent breakfast. Of course, decent by my definition might not align with everyone else's. I looked around my kitchen, which was basically a temple of sweets. Cookies, lollipops, or maybe a slice of that rainbow pudding cake I just perfected the recipe for the other day. Probably not the best idea for growing children. They'd need something heartier. After rummaging a bit, I found some leftover oats, which I usually used as binding agents for my extra sticky cookie dough, and a bit of vanilla goat's milk from last night. I decided to make oatmeal. I know, it sounds dreadfully dull, but with a touch of Ilara magic, some wild honey, a pinch of aromatic cinnamon, and thin slices of candied ginger, it became something rather unique. At least it wasn't made entirely of sugar. By the time the children woke up, blinking groggily at their surroundings, I'd already placed 2 bowls of Ilara-style oatmeal on the almond cookie table. A warm, sweet aroma filled the room. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I've made you some breakfast." Hansel and Gretel looked at the bowls, then back at me, eyes full of suspicion, probably wondering if I'd laced it with some sleep-inducing potion. I couldn't blame them. If I were in their shoes, I'd be wary too. "Eat," I said, giving them a little nudge. "It's not poisoned, or at least not the kind that tastes this good." Another failed attempt at humor. I should probably enroll in one of those social skills for lifelong introverts workshops. Fortunately, hunger won out over suspicion. Hansel was the first to cautiously try a spoonful. His eyes lit up. "This is delicious, ma'am." Gretel followed suit, and soon both bowls were empty. I smiled to myself. Looks like my culinary skills weren't so bad, even when toned down for regular diets. After breakfast, a new dilemma dawned on me. I couldn't just let them wander around all day inside the house. First, they'd disrupt the carefully cultivated peace I'd built for myself. Second, and more urgently, I feared they might literally eat my house. The way Hansel kept sneaking glances at the chocolate beams on the wall was alarming. Ahem, I said, attempting to put on my authoritative homeowner tone. Since you're staying here, you'll have to help out with some chores. Think of it as paying rent with labor. Fair enough, right? Like one of those unpaid internship programs big companies love so much. Gretel, the more nimble and obedient of the two, was assigned cleaning duty, which in my house meant sweeping up crumbs. I gave her a broom made of dried licorice stalks and warned her to sweep gently, one overzealous. In the days that followed, I noticed Gretel growing quieter by the hour. The girl, once curious and alert, had become withdrawn. Her wide, round eyes never seemed to leave me, always watching, always measuring. Sometimes they held fear, sometimes suspicion, but always something I couldn't quite name. I tried to guess. Maybe she missed home, missed her parents, or maybe she just wasn't used to a place so far removed from everything familiar. Children, after all, are like April weather, sunny one moment, stormy the next, impossible to predict. Now and then, I attempted conversation, a gentle question here, a soft offer there. "Do you need anything, dear?" I'd ask, and she'd just shake her head and drift away. Introvert, I thought, probably the deep kind, like me back when I was younger, tucking myself into a corner with a book, avoiding unnecessary chatter. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that inside Gretel's little head, my innocent actions were being rewritten into a horror film. Every time I muttered to myself while experimenting with candy formulas, a dash more moonroot powder should deepen the flavor. Every time I chatted with my old stone oven, "All right, darling, time to shine, hot and steady now." She heard everything. And, of course, when you're a terrified child with a wild imagination, those harmless comments morph into something far more sinister. The root collection I kept, strange, twisted shapes I'd gathered for their rare flavors, surely looked to her like the ingredients of a deadly potion. My occasional chats with the ravens and squirrels in my garden, a lonely old woman's habit, nothing more, must have seemed to her like commands to a gang of loyal familiars. A tragic misunderstanding, really, the kind that feels like accidentally liking an old photo of your ex on social media and then watching the internet spiral into rumors of a dramatic rekindling. And then the day came. I declared it a grand baking day. It had been too long since I made a giant batch of gingerbread to patch the house walls. Some spots were getting nibbled by bugs and weather alike. Besides, Hansel's recovery was going well. His cheeks were pinker, he looked a bit rounder. I figured he deserved a treat. I'd bake him a big cake, a thank you gift for being such a good patient. The house buzzed with activity, at least from my point of view. I hummed an old tune while gathering ingredients, high-grade flour, which I had traded 3 rare candy recipes for with that stingy gnome in the mountain, freshly laid wild eggs, and, of course, my secret blend of spices. My grand stone oven, the pride of my kitchen, had been lit since early morning, radiating a cozy warmth throughout the room. "Gretel," I called cheerfully, "could you lend me a hand, dear? Grab some dry wood from the storeroom, will you? We're about to have a proper baking party." The girl startled, dropping the leaf duster she'd been holding. She looked at me, eyes wide and unreadable. I didn't pay it much attention, just figured she was daydreaming again. "Chop, chop now," I said. "The fire's nearly ready." While she fetched the wood, I began checking the oven. This part was crucial. The heat had to be just right, hot enough, evenly spread, so the cookies would bake golden and fragrant. I used a long metal poker to stir the coals, leaning in to get a good look. The oven was old. Sometimes it needs a little extra encouragement. "Gretel, dear," I called, seeing her return with the firewood. "Come here for a moment, will you? Take a look inside and tell me if the coals are even. My eyes aren't what they used to be." That was all I meant, a simple request, the kind people make when they need a sharper pair of eyes. Or maybe, deep down, I just wanted to share a bit of the craft, pass along a few baking secrets. Who knows, maybe she'd grow up to be a brilliant baker herself. Gretel approached hesitantly. I stepped aside, pointing toward the oven door, now slightly ajar. "There, look inside. See if the heat is spread out or if any parts are still dark." She didn't answer, just slowly bent down to peer into the glowing mouth of the oven. The heat kissed her cheeks, turning them rosy. I was still daydreaming about how to decorate Hansel's cake, whipped cream or dark chocolate, when suddenly, a violent shove from behind. I wasn't braced for it. My whole body lurched forward. Bang! My head slammed against the stone oven's edge. For one stunned heartbeat, I felt pain, sharp, blinding, and then heat. The pain vanished as quickly as it had come. The searing heat faded, replaced by a strange, weightless sensation, like floating. I no longer felt the heaviness of old bones, nor the suffocating scent of burnt sugar. Instead, there was silence, deep, absolute silence. No colors, no sounds, just my consciousness drifting, like a speck of sugar caught in a gust of wind and whisked into some unfamiliar dimension. So this is what it feels like to log out of the living world, I thought vaguely. Not too bad, actually. At least I wouldn't have to worry about whether the squirrels had stolen all the gumdrops off my roof anymore. Then, like mist slowly lifting, images began to form around me. Or in me, perhaps. I wasn't even sure if I still had eyes to see them. I saw my beloved gingerbread house, or what was left of it. Part of the roof had collapsed. The once golden cookie walls were scorched and blackened. The oven door sat shut, quiet and cold now, like the gaping mouth of some great beast that had just swallowed its last secret. It was all in ruins, worse than the kitchen of a food blogger after a failed live stream. And then I saw them, Hansel and Gretel. The children stood a short distance away, hand in hand, staring at the smoking remains. Their faces wore a strange blend of emotions, fear, relief, and yes, something like pride. Hansel, the boy I had so painstakingly fattened up with the finest cakes, still looked skinny, but his eyes no longer held that skittish, wary look. Gretel, with her golden hair and wide eyes, whispered something to her brother, occasionally pointing at the oven. I strained to hear them, and though their words reached me only in fragments, they hit me like a slap across the soul, if that's what I had now. The wicked witch is gone, punished at last. Good thing I was quick, or we'd have ended up as dinner. There must be treasure inside, just like in the fairy tales. Treasure? In my house? I laughed, a silent laugh that echoed only in this strange, unanchored void. My greatest treasures were my recipe scrolls, my jars of rare spices, my collection of oddly shaped baking molds. But to them, worthless. Children only believe in shiny coins and glittering gems. To me, those recipes were worth a kingdom. I watched them creep back into the house, searching through the wreckage. They discovered my stash of colorful candies, the ones I'd saved for special occasions. magic sweets, they called them. They uncovered wooden chests filled with fragrant nuts and dried fruits, my prized filling ingredients, treasure chests, they cheered. Oh, the innocence of children, and the heartbreak of being misunderstood. If only I could speak to them. If only I could explain that the pen Hansel had been in was just a recovery room, part of my nutritional rehabilitation plan. That the meals I'd prepared weren't to fatten him for slaughter, but because I truly believed growing kids should eat well, eat joyfully. That asking Gretel to peer into the oven was just a simple favor, the plea of an old woman with poor eyesight, not the beginning of some nefarious ritual. But I couldn't. All I could do was hover in this nameless place, watching my actions twisted beyond recognition, watching my awkward, tender attempts at connection be recast as wickedness. And it hurt more than the flames ever did. It was like spending a week perfecting a presentation only for the projector to break at the last minute, or worse, for your boss to suddenly change direction entirely. It was helplessness, pure and bitter. Then they found it, a small tin box where I kept a few old gold coins, my savings from long ago, meant for buying myself a real silver cent of baking tolls one day. They shouted in triumph. They grabbed hands and danced in the ashes of my gingerbread dream. All she ever wanted was something simple, a little sweetness for herself. Maybe, if the world allowed it, to share that sweetness with others. But the world answered with fire, and a verdict named misunderstanding. And so, just like Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, or, yes, even Hansel and Gretel, the tale reminds us, behind every so-called villain, there may be a quiet sorrow, a voice never heard, a heart, perhaps, not evil, but simply alone. So the next time you savor a fairy tale's sweet ending, pause. Ask yourself, who was left in the shadows? Whose story never made it into the book? Because sometimes the line between witch and woman, between wickedness and difference, is as thin and fragile as a strand of spun sugar. The tale of Hansel and Gretel and the wicked witch in the gingerbread house spread quickly, far beyond the thick canopy of the whispering woods. It was told and retold in small villages nestled at the foot of the mountains, in roadside inns where weary travelers paused for rest, and eventually in brightly colored picture books for children. Hansel and Gretel became heroes, symbols of cleverness, courage, and sibling love that triumphed over evil. The gingerbread house, once my pride and sanctuary, became a symbol of terror in everyone's mind, a sugary trap no child should ever approach. Ilara, the woman who only ever longed for a quiet life and the simple joys of flour and sugar, was immortalized as a monster. With every retelling, every exaggerated embellishment, they draped me in a cloak of cruelty, burying the truth of who I was, the thoughts I never got to share. Like a single negative comment online drowning out 100 silent good deeds, the story of the witch became an unshakable truth, a verdict sealed by fear and ignorance. Time passed. The whispering woods continued its own quiet cycles. My gingerbread house, after that fateful day, slowly collapsed. Rain and sun wore away the cookie walls. The candy roof melted into the earth. Nature quietly reclaimed it all, wrapping the land in moss and memory. Before long, nothing remained to mark that a marvel of sweet architecture had ever stood there. Nothing except, perhaps, a strange occurrence. On windless afternoons or after summer rain, people sometimes swore they caught the faintest scent in the air, a sweet, fleeting aroma of ginger, cinnamon, and burnt caramel, like a distant memory struggling to surface. High atop the ancient oak, the old owl, my one true companion, remained. Perhaps he was the only soul who remembered a different version of me. He still hooted at dusk, his golden eyes piercing the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, he was telling another version of the story, a version no one wanted to hear. The forest kept its secrets, and the truth about Ilara faded, crumbling like dry leaves beneath the trees. As for Hansel and Gretel, they returned to the village, carrying their spoils, the coins and candy they believed to be treasure. Their lives changed. No more hunger, no more cruel stepmother. I heard she vanished soon after the children disappeared. Their tale was praised, celebrated. They were admired, envied. But perhaps some things lingered. Years later, long after the forest had become a faded shadow in their minds, Hansel would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, haunted by the flicker of a sad smile and a pair of tired eyes. Gretel, walking past a bakery display or catching the scent of sugar at a festival, would feel a tightness in her chest, a strange, inescapable guilt she couldn't quite name. They never spoke of it, not even to each other. The myth of the evil witch had rooted itself too deeply. To question it, to say "what if," would risk breaking the image of heroism they now wore like armor. But maybe, just maybe, the sweetness of their victory always carried a faint bitterness, like a delicious dessert that leaves you heavy after the last bite. And perhaps that was my final triumph, quiet and unseen. A tiny seed of truth hidden in the cracks of their memory, a reminder that even stories carved in stone might have another side, told in a voice no one thought to hear. Every tale has many angles, and the villain in one version might be the misunderstood in another. Ilara, with all her oddities, her clumsy kindness, her unwavering love for sweets, was perhaps nothing more than a victim of loneliness, of fear, others, and her own, and of a kind of innocence